Thank you, Luke. And good morning, everyone. Sometimes when you're getting ready to speak in church like this, sometimes things come real easy, sometimes they don't. And this is one of those don't times. But I'm praying that the Lord will do something here to be able to give you guys a blessing. So Robert, if you want to throw that up there. As a scripture that Luke read, it's about, it's not going to be really a sermon or a talk, it's going to be a story. Don and I were talking about this, and we thought maybe just telling a story out of the Bible would be kind of a fun thing to do. And so that's what we're going to do this morning, and it's going to be a story with a lot of pictures. So maybe it'll kind of get in your mind. But at any rate, this is the story. It's out of the book of Esther. There once was a king. He wasn't a bad king. In fact, he wasn't a bad king at all. He was at a party in his palace, and he was happy because of the wine he was drinking. His queen was brought up in conversation. And he decided to call her to come to the party so everyone could look at her, because she was easy on the eyes. And so, as a king does, he summoned her to come to the party. Now, the fair queen received the invitation, but this queen was not really a yes queen. She did not appreciate the king wanting to parade her around so everyone could look upon her. How do you women feel about that? What would you think if your husband said, "Hey, come to this party because I want everybody to look at you"? What would you say to him? Off with his head. So, with grit and tenacity, she simply said, "No." Now, you have to understand something about those days. Women did not say no to their man. Now, I have to be honest with you, I was born in a country like that. You know, I was born in Arabia, and I got to see the way men treated women. And really, they were just a commodity, a kind of a beast of burden over there. And my dad would always tell me, don't treat women like this. This is not the way you treat women. This is wrong. And so I can really understand that period and that part of the country, how a king could say, "Come over here so everybody can look at you." And apparently this queen was rash enough to say no. So that's the way it was in those days, though. Women did not say no to their man. That was a given there. It was unheard of. I mean, this could start a trend with all the women in the country thinking they could say no to their husbands, and that would just not be acceptable. Right? You women are looking at you like, ah. Well, when the king heard she refused to come to be paraded before his friends, he was furious. He didn't like the fact that she said no. He's the king. She has to do this. Not only has she done wrong to the king, and this is the wise men telling the king this, not only has she done wrong to the king, but when all the women of the kingdom hear what she did, they will despise their husbands. Something has to be done. Something has to be done. So, they talked the king into a royal command, and written among the laws to the Medes and the Persians, that Queen Vashti could never more come before the king, and to give her royal estate to someone else who would be better than she was. So now some action is being taken. We can't have this. This woman said no to the king. Let's punish her. And so they did. Then the king's servants that ministered to him came to him and suggested that there be fair young virgins sought through all the kingdom and brought to him. The virgins would be brought to Heji, the king's chamberlain, to have the virgins purified. Now that took months to do. I didn't realize this when I was doing my study here, but to purify these virgins for the king, it took months to do that. Then let the maiden which pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti. All this pleased the king, and so it was done. So a lot of stuff going on here. Now, I'm going to stop in the story right here just for a second, because this is a story in the Bible. And the story has a lot to do with God and a lot to do with Satan. This is a story where Satan is battling God over a nation, a king, a queen, an uncle, a lot of stuff going on. And I always, in my mind, I picture this, and it's not like a chess game. I don't believe it like a chess game. But I do believe that Satan does things, and then God has to counteract it. And then Satan takes that action and tries to do something else. And God, on the other turn, turns and does something else. And it's always a battle going on between the two. It's kind of military strategy. Well, if the enemy does this, then I'm going to do this. And if he does that, I'll do this. And it's back and forth, back and forth. And as we talk about this story, I want you to keep in the back of your mind the struggle behind the scenes that's going on between good and evil. Okay? So this took months. Then let the maiden which pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti. All this pleased the king, and so it was done. Now, near the palace lived a man called Mordecai, and I didn't know this about him, but years before, he had been captured by King Nebuchadnezzar and carried away. And now he lives in Shushan with Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter. Her parents had passed away, and he brought her up to respect and to love God. She was a good person and very obedient as a young child. But she grew up to be a very lovely lady. And so it came to pass when the king's commandment and his decree was heard, many maidens were taken to the place under the watchful care of Hegai, the keeper of the women, for the king. So the proclamation goes out. These women need to be collected, and they need to be taken to the king, which, like I said, takes months. And so here's a depiction of the women, kind of like a modern day spa in a way. But it took 12 months, for so were the days of their purification with oil of myrrh and sweet odors, and with other things for the purifying of the women. I imagine some were happy to be there, because maybe they're coming from a really bad home life or a lot of poverty. And maybe, like I said, a bad home life. And some must have been very sad to be there because they were ripped out of their family and their home and taken to a strange place. But here they are, being taken care of, being, I don't know, spread with oils and myrrh and sweet odors and stuff. Preparation, months of preparation to be able to just walk in front of the king. Then the virgins were paraded before the king. And when the king saw Esther, he loved her above all other women. I guess you could say it was love at first sight. Now you got to remember, there were quite a few women here, and as they're passing before the king, all of a sudden he sees Esther, and he falls in love with her instantly. Now, let me ask you a question. Did God have anything to do with that? What are the chances that Esther would have been chosen? 1 out of 100, 1 out of 300, 1 out of 5. I don't know how many women there were, but there were a lot. What are the chances that Queen Esther was chosen? We don't know, but we're going to find out someday. And she obtained grace and favor in his sight, more than all the virgins, so much that he set the royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. And so now you have a new queen, Queen Esther. And going from her house with Mordecai to being the queen, yes, it took months, but is God involved in this by any chance? Do you think maybe a little? Or you think it's all chance that it happened? I think God is very involved in this whole story. And in the kingdom there was a man named Haman, who was advanced by the king and set his seat above all the princes that were with him. And all the king's servants that were in the king's gate bowed and reverenced Haman. For the king had so commanded concerning him. So, for some reason, the king liked Haman, and he elevated him to a very high position above all the other princes. And then he commanded that when he walks by, you kneel down and you bow to him, pay him homage and honor. But there was one man who would not do that. His name was Mordecai. He would not bow or reverence Haman. And that made Haman furious. Now, what kind of guts did it take for Mordecai when everybody else is bowing? And you see that picture, he's just standing up. And Haman's looking at him going, you, I hate you. So, to get back at Mordecai, Haman devised a plan and approached the king with it. So Haman, knowing that Mordecai was a Jew, told the king about a certain people whose laws are different from all people. Neither did they keep the king's laws. Therefore, their actions should not be tolerated. These strange people who live out there, and he didn't call them by name, but he said they need to be taken care of because they're not bowing down to your laws. And the king told Haman, do to them what you feel fit, and gave Haman his ring to seal the decree. So big thing here. Now see, we got to step back and see what's going on with God and Satan in this story. They're fighting each other over this group of people, God's chosen people, the Jews. Do you think Satan wants to annihilate them, destroy them, get rid of them? That's his plan. Do you think God wants that to happen? No, he wants them to be his example, his witnesses. And so the decree was made and was sent to all the provinces to destroy and to kill and to cause to perish all Jews, both young and old, little children and women, and to take all their possessions. Now that's a pretty good deal. I mean, if you're a group of people and you see the Jews over there and they've got houses and they've got items and goods and money and animals, and you, by decree, can lawfully go over there and kill them and take all their stuff, I would say that's pretty easy work, wouldn't you say? But that's a decree the king made. It's okay now to go and kill them and take all that they have. What would you feel like if you were a Jew? I think we need to move to Florida. That's what they're probably saying. Okay, let's get out of here. When Queen Esther heard about the decree, she did not panic. But that was not so with Mordecai. He freaked out. Can anyone here relate to Esther in a situation like this? When something all of a sudden, boom, hits you in your life, and it's really a very serious thing, can you keep your cool like Esther? Or Mordecai, who tore his clothes and put sackcloth on his head with ashes and went out into the midst of the city and cried with a loud voice and a bitter cry. He was freaking out. And yet, here's Esther. She's staying pretty calm about this whole thing. Can anybody relate to Mordecai? I can. All right. Oops. Queen Esther, in her calmness, told a messenger, tell Mordecai, tell all the people to pray and fast for her for 3 days because she was going to go before the king. So she's given him a message. I'm going to go before the king. Now, everybody knew what that meant. It was instant death. You don't come before the king. For someone to approach the king without an invitation was a death decree. Instant. You were killed. Unless the king held out a scepter to that person. If he didn't put that scepter up to that person, they were going to die. If he put the scepter up, they would live, and he would listen to them. Not very many people actually got the scepter, from what I understand. Queen Esther was willing to take that chance. For what? For what? For her own good? No. Chances are she was going to get killed. What was she doing it for? Her people. The people that she loved and she knew that lived with Mordecai in the surrounding area. She didn't think they should be killed, so she's going to take this chance. And it was a big chance. Can you see this battle going on between good and evil in this story, back and forth? Now keep in mind, the last 3 days, hundreds of people were not eating or drinking and in constant prayer for Queen Esther not to lose her head. 3 days and 3 nights. When's the last time you didn't eat or drink and you prayed for 3 days and 3 nights? Anybody can raise their hand? I fasted for 3 days. I drank a lot of water, but I fasted for 3 days. And after about the second day, it doesn't hurt too bad. But can you imagine not eating or drinking for 3 days? That's a pretty big thing to ask somebody. But prayer works. The king asked Esther what she wanted, up to half of his kingdom. So he did put the scepter forward, and her life was spared. And then not only that, he says, what do you want? I'll give you anything, up to half of my kingdom. What do you want? So was this guy in love or what? He was in love. The king asked Esther what she wanted. She simply invited, this is what she said, she simply invited him, the king, and Haman to a banquet for that evening. That was it. I imagine the king went, well, okay, that's pretty easy. Yeah, we can do that. And so he summoned Haman, and they went to the banquet for just the three of them. It was just a banquet for the three of them. So the king and Haman and Queen Esther had a private banquet. And then after the banquet was over, Queen Esther invited the king and Haman back the following day for another banquet. And they had such a good time and good food, they said, sure, we'll be back. On the way home that afternoon from that first banquet, Haman again saw Mordecai standing while others kneeled. He went home and told his wife what a great day he had at the banquet that Queen Esther had prepared for him and the king, and told her that Queen Esther invited him back to another banquet the very next day. So he's pretty happy about that. But then he made a statement. But he couldn't enjoy himself knowing that Mordecai was disrespecting him. He couldn't handle it. He just, how can I have a good time at a banquet when this guy won't kneel down to me? And so he was having a hard time with it. So his wife and all his friends suggested, why don't you have a gallows built, 75 feet tall? And tomorrow morning you can ask the king to have Mordecai hanged on it. And then you can go to the banquet happy. And Haman thought, this was a great idea. And so he had the gallows built. Now, can you imagine a gallows 75 feet? Why would you build it 75 feet? I guess maybe so everybody could see it from anywhere. That's a pretty high gallows. Then that night, as the king went to bed, he could not sleep, and he was bored, and so he started reading some of the writings that some of the scribes had wrote down about his kingdom and his palace, the things that were going on, kind of history books. And he was bored, so he was reading these things, and found a story about this guy named Mordecai who had saved his life by telling the guards about a plot that was against the king to take his life. And so the king looked at this writing and said, who is this man? Was he ever rewarded? Did we ever give him anything for doing that? So the next day the king asked Haman, Haman, what should be done to honor a man who helped the king? Now, of course, Haman thought he was thinking about, that the king was, thinking about Haman. So, Haman said, thinking that this was going to happen to him, I think, king, what you ought to do is take some of your clothes, the royal robes, and put it on this man, and then put him on your great white steed, the horse, and then parade him through town and let everybody know what happened, and so they can honor him. And Haman was thinking, that would be pretty cool. I'd like to have that happen to me. And the king said, that's a great idea. So let it be done. Now, and that's exactly what happened, except Haman was made to pull the steed, Mordecai, around the palace. And boy, was Haman embarrassed and mad and upset. Okay? How can he bring this up to the king now? I want to hang this guy. He couldn't do it after the king honored him so greatly. So, at the banquet, at the second banquet, the king asked Esther what she wanted, because she had told him, I will tell you what I really want at the second banquet that night. And the king had the banquet, and he said, okay, now, Esther, what was it that you wanted? And she said this, if it please your majesty to grant my humble request, my wish is that I may live and that my people may live. My people and I have been sold for slaughter. If it were nothing more serious than being sold into slavery, I would have kept quiet and not bothered you about it. But we are about to be destroyed and exterminated. And the king went, what? And he said, then the king asked Queen Esther, who dares to do such a thing? Where is this man? And Esther answered, our enemy, our persecutor, is this evil man Haman. Haman faced the king and queen with terror. Haman now was in the hot seat, and she was pointing to him, saying that this is the guy who's going to get rid of my people, and he is mad. In fact, he was so mad, he left the room. He got really upset, and he walked out of the room. And while he was out of the room, Haman was freaking out. So Esther was laying on a couch, and Haman went and jumped on the couch and grabbed her and pleaded with her for his life, begging for his life. And then guess what happened? The king returns and finds Haman on the couch with his queen and thinks he's attacking her. And so he said, and while this is all happening, meanwhile, one of the people who takes care of the king told the king that Haman had built a gallows that night before to hang Mordecai. And that even made the king more furious. So then the king said, that gallows is built for you. And so he ended up going to the gallows that day and being hung by the neck until dead. And the king made a decree that all the Jews could defend themselves. If they were attacked, they were allowed to take all the possessions of the attackers, and after they were killed. So the king made a decree saying, okay, Jewish people, you have a right to defend yourself. You can fight back. And even if you do that, if somebody attacks you and you kill them, you can have their possessions. And there was some battles that went on, and the Jews prevailed, and they won a lot of possessions. And the Jews were also allowed, and I guess these were evil guys, allowed to attack the 10 sons of Haman, they had a lot of possessions. They were very wealthy. And they killed them and took all their possessions too. So, Haman and his family were wiped out, all their possessions taken. You see this battle going on? Back and forth, back and forth. And the king and queen lived happily ever after. Now, we're not 100% sure about that because that's what the story is in the Bible, and we don't have a lot of information on what happened after that. But I'm assuming that things went well. I know this king was in love, and after, who knows if Esther was in love with the king, but he did do some nice things for her. We can see the story from beginning to end, and at times it seemed like God was not in control. I mean, when you're, and ladies, picture this, and dads, you have this family, and all of a sudden President Trump issues all the virgins to come to the White House. I shouldn't pick on Trump, but maybe anybody, the president. And these guards, the military, comes and gets your daughter and takes her away. What are you thinking? What kind of feelings are you going through? You like that? If you're a Christian, you're thinking, God, where are you? What's going on here? How could this happen? And I'm sure that's what was going on with the people there too. Like the soldiers come in your house and they take your daughter away. You know, that's not a good thing, is it? No, of course not. You wouldn't want that to happen. So we can see the story, this whole story from beginning to end, and at times it really does seem like God's out of control. But then something happens in the story and it seems like he is in control. And then something happens, it looks like he's out of control. And then something happens, it looks like he's in control. It's this battle going on between good and evil all the time. So how is it with your life? Does it seem like it's out of control at times in your life? Does that happen to you at all? Is everything totally pristine and just in control? Everything going good, right? No, I don't think so. I don't think that happens in everybody's life. Things just happen all the time, and it seems like you wonder, God, where are you? Are you in control here? Do you truly believe that God is in control of your life? If you do, then let's look at what we can learn from the story. So what lessons can we learn from this story? Number one, when things don't go your way, don't worry. Number two, when things look really bad, don't worry. When things look really, really bad, don't worry. When the whole world is falling apart all around you, and it is, by the way, don't worry. When it looks like you're going to die, don't worry. When you stop thinking God is in control, start worrying.
Amen.
People, God is in control of your life. And if we let him, he will stay in control. Does that mean everything's good's going to happen in your life? No, it doesn't. Unfortunately, it doesn't. But if he's in control, it can only end up good. And after all, are we really meant for this world? We weren't built for this world. This isn't what it's all about. He's built something else different for us. He's got something better for us. And if we just allow him to be in control, we'll get there.
Amen.
So when all these things in this world hit you, don't worry. Just worry when you start to think that God isn't in control, because then you're on shaky ground. Our closing hymn is hymn number 508. Beth, would you like to come up here and lead us?